So it's a pleasure to introduce our next event. We're going to be double teamed by Kirk Garrett of Susitna Energy Systems and Jay Yeager of Southwest Wind Power. And they're going to be talking about a microgrid concept to renewable development. A little bit about Kirk. He practices what he preaches. He is one of the well-known sellers of renewable energy systems in Alaska. And he got into that because he lived off-grid at a place called Flathorn Lake. And he needed to find some products to make electricity. They weren't available in Alaska. So he started importing them and selling them to others, and he's been doing a great job of it. Jay Yeager, he currently resides in Flagstaff, Arizona. We're glad that you can come up on this trip, and I know that he's been up here for other installations of his SkyStream turbines. He works full-time for Southwest Wind Power. Southwest Wind Power is a world leader in maker of small turbines, and we welcome Kirk and Jay. Thanks.
Thank you, Brent. First of all, I hope we can keep your attention for the full time span that we were allotted. Kat, what do we do here? Just press the down button?
That should work.
Okay. As you can tell, I'm a hands-on guy. I don't deal with computers a whole lot. I'd rather be out in the field putting up a wind turbine. We started Susitna Energy out of my garage quite some time ago when we wanted to do a system for ourselves at Flathorn Lake. I couldn't find anybody up here that could really help me. I was contacting California on a regular basis, and I pretty much made every mistake that you can make. And we've learned from what works to what definitely doesn't work. We've done systems all across the state. Actually, we've done some down in the lower 48 and overseas also, but our primary mission is to help rural Alaskans and people who want to have a quality lifestyle off the grid and now even on grid with grid solar and grid wind. And I'm pleased to announce that I have 2 of the Southwest Wind Power SkyStreams hooked to ML&P for the first time. Need to get a little closer?
Yep.
We got 2 SkyStreams on Fairbank Street that are now hooked to ML&P. The first 2, it took 3.5 years of hard, diligent work on my part to convince the municipality of Anchorage that wind is not a bad idea. And I'm real proud of that. We also have 2 on Chugach Electric at Partouche Plumbing. So those are 4 working examples in the municipality of Anchorage. Perryville is one of our shining examples of what we think we can do for smaller villages. If you've been to the small villages, you understand what kind of energy issues they have. Last summer I was in a village, I'm not going to say where, but I sat there and watched a lady come up with a gallon can, Coleman jug, and she bought a gallon of fuel. And when she was walking away, she said, "We're going to have heat tonight." And there's some real serious issues happening in western Alaska, okay? And it's discouraging that a country that we live in has all these energy issues. And I'd like to point out one thing Peter said. The government doesn't give you anything that they didn't already take from you. And that's a real accurate point. I'd like Jay Yeager, who's a personal friend. I actually call him MacGyver, because he's done some pretty amazing things with us, to expound on the turbine itself, and then I'll step back in.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kirk. The turbine we're here discussing today is the SkyStream 3.7. The turbine was originally commissioned for development by the Department of Energy as the next residential class wind turbine for direct grid connected applications. We filled that requirement very well, and after having done that, we really kind of wondered what we should do next, and looked at the turbine in a new perspective and tried to find growing and greater applications for this technology. It's a relatively small machine by the standards that we are talking about here over the last 2 days. It's a sub 10 kilowatt machine. Some of you may have seen it in the room next door. It's a full-size production version of that machine. It's rated conservatively at 2.4 kilowatts. It has a 3.7 meter diameter blade, and it is an entirely integrated machine in that the inverter is housed within the nacelle, and so in other words, all power conditioning and control go on within the body of the machine itself. So it's a very tidy, compact little unit. All you have to really do is give it an ordinary grid-like power supply, and it will take over from there. I don't know how well you can perhaps see some of the specifications from the audience. At some point then we have questions. If you have specific questions, I'll be glad to answer more about it.
You gotta love the small print. I can't hardly read it, and I'm standing up here. Anyway, Perryville. I was invited to Perryville by the leaders of Perryville, and they asked me if I'd come down and talk to them about energy issues. And I accepted their invitation. I flew down there, and when we walked into the little meeting hall, I kind of had this look of, wow, look at all these faces of deer in the headlights, you know. I said, what's wrong? And they said, well, we didn't think you'd come. But it was one of the best experiences that I can honestly say that I've been involved with, because these people are genuinely concerned about their village. They want to make sure that they're around for a long time. They've seen other villages around them disappear for numerous reasons, but Perryville is a beautiful place, and it's full of nice people. The village actually purchased their turbines from me, and they did it with village funds. They own and they operate and they maintain their wind farm. They own 10 SkyStreams on 70-foot towers. The towers are made out of 5-inch Schedule 40 pipe. They tilt down to the ground, so all maintenance is done on the ground. Nobody climbs anything. We've been looking at the return on investment, and you know, my personal feeling is that there's a lot of give and take on this, because at 60 cents kilowatt hours, they're assuming 10-year payback. But I believe right now the cost of energy in Perryville is up to 95 cents kilowatt hour because of fuel prices. The return on investment at 6,000 gallons of fuel a year at $4.50 a gallon, 6 years. Pretty good deal. Diesel fuel this morning, driving from Anchorage, was $4.15 a gallon for diesel fuel, and that's in Anchorage, and that's today. And that's just with oil at $112 a barrel. I don't know about what you really believe in your heart, but I don't think oil is going to stay anywhere close to that with the world conditions that we have right now. They actually purchased their system of 10 SkyStreams in '07. It took a while to get things laid out for them, and Jay and I went down and helped them lay things out. One thing I wanted to point out is we didn't employ anyone on this project from Susitin Energy. The village of Perryville managed this project and employed all the workers. It was 100% village contained. So I applaud Northwind for hiring 30 people, but we didn't hire anybody. We worked for them at no charge. There's a lot of pride in that statement, because when being a crane operator for 35 years, I'd go to all these locations and work. And I always watched and see what was available locally. Jobs that are in these local villages are really hard to get. The state spends lots of money trying to create jobs in these little villages. And we were proud that all the work involved with our project was by village residents. They have a 25 kW wind farm, although typically these figures are rather understated, I believe, because we see 3,000 watts coming out of each one of them pretty consistently wherever we have them. And they are connected to 120 kW John Deere diesel. The whole aspect of this project was, when I was talking to the village of Perryville, they wanted to get off at 220 kW Cummins and switch to their smaller generator. But they couldn't do it when school was in session. When they added the wind, that's where they could switch to the 120 kW. So they had a tremendous fuel savings right there. And they're stating now that the 120 is just kind of loafing along. It might not be 100% efficient loafing along, but it certainly is a heck of a lot better than running the generator that uses twice the fuel. It's a Class 2 wind regime. A lot of professionals say, well, it isn't worth doing wind at Class 2. But we think it is. And to date, they've produced greater than 65 megawatt hours. Some of the key benefits we'd like to size on is size and scalability of multiple small wind systems that can be maintained are a better application for some of these places. I firmly believe big turbines belong in the hubs. That's my feeling. I know a lot of you will disagree, but if you can't maintain it where it is and something goes wrong, you're right back where you started. We can produce very short cycle times between project implementation and completion. It's pretty simple to find a zoom boom and a small excavator in almost any village. But it's pretty hard to find a 100-ton lattice boom crane and a barge to move it around. And our self-erecting towers did not need any special equipment. We try to keep the technology pretty simple. Basically, we use a winch. And if we have a pickup truck with a 2-inch Schedule 40 hitch, we're good to go. All the assembly and maintenance performed on the ground. We feel that that's the safest way to work on this equipment. I don't like climbing towers, and you can see I'm not built for that. I can't even get Jay to climb a tower. And the economic development and new local employment is always good in these small villages. Like I said, the state spends millions of dollars trying to create jobs. We show up and we have a job for anybody who wants to work. If you can run a number 2 shovel, you can put in a SkyStream. Minimum balance of systems requirements. If you already have a grid, we can connect to it. If it's UL, good for you. If it isn't, still accommodate it, because we have the ability to reprogram. And we can do it over the internet if we have an adequate communication system. I'm proud also to say at this very minute, my crew is in Perryville installing a solar tracker, 30 modules on a. Keep it simple. I know that when these systems get more and more complex, it's hard enough to keep them working right here in Anchorage, never mind on the peninsula or out on the chain or Pribilofs or wherever they are. I firmly believe that the simpler they are, the more reliable they are. We need to expand on our remote monitoring. I don't know how many times CAT has wanted data. And to get data to everybody who wants data is our primary mission now, because we understand in order to convince you that we have a viable solution, we need to prove it. And with data, we can. So we got your data coming. That's a promise. I told them they couldn't come home until it was up. Better front-end modeling and closer project management will reduce the cost and cycle time on future projects, and that's absolutely true. This was the first mini grid we did, and the problems we encountered were we'd send this, and then we'd send that, and then we'd send this, and freight was killing us. So Any other village propositions we want to do are obviously going to be well thought out before it leaves town. And we hope to get everything in one box, or at least gather it all in one pile, so we say. Like I said, we try to keep it simple. That's what we use to stand these towers up. We found a truck that was available, hooked our winch to it. Jay and I demonstrated how we stand and raise a tower properly with all the safety. And then we watched as the other 9 turbines popped up. Very simple. What's really important that I found out at this show from one of the residents from Perryville that, hey, one of the turbines quit last week. I didn't know about it. But they lowered it down, they changed the relay board, and they stood it back up. Took an hour. I'm impressed. I didn't even know. I didn't need to know, because we showed them how to do it, and they did it themselves. They didn't even call me. Community participation is paramount. If these communities aren't behind you, these systems are not going to work. So the best thing to do is get them involved early, train them, and make them part of it, and they're very proud of it. And that is my presentation, and I would also like to point out the villagers of Perryville, Gerald Cosbrook and Mr. Shangan's here. Please stand up and please be recognized. These guys are great Alaskans.
Thank you. Can we take some questions, please?
150,000, was that the complete wind farm?
Total project cost,
All 10?
all 10
Installed?
installed.
Cost. Wow. And what was the peak community load?
Sorry, ask me again.
What's the peak community load?
Well, you know, it varies dramatically throughout the course of the day and the course of the year, depending on whether school's in session. We don't really have a good map on that. One of the things we learned in this project is that we need to improve our perception on what's going on within the system, better monitoring capability essentially, so that we can profile the load more accurately. At the level we're at now, which is a relatively low participation or contribution, it's not too significant for us to have to depend on the engine-driven generator's ability to modulate and control changes in the load profile. So at this point, we're not highly sensitive to that situation. I'm hoping that we'll have the opportunity to grow that out a little bit and expand our capability and controls capability particularly, so that we can get in there at a higher penetration.
And one more question. Any foundation? What kind of foundation?
These 70-foot self-erecting towers are anchored by cast-in-place concrete foundations. Another thing we learned, of course, in this project is that the availability to concrete in these remote villages is a real challenge, a logistical challenge that is hard to overcome. So we're running a new development cycle right now on precast foundation components that can be transported easily to the site. It would help us in a couple of ways. One, it would help us mitigate the cost of having relatively exotic materials delivered to the village, and also speed up our cycle time on the deployment.
Very impressive. Thanks.
Okay, I've got a question back here, or actually just more of a comment observation. Most of us are in the mode of following the Renewable Energy Fund. It's a great thing, great opportunity for the state, but I think this is a really good example of folks trying something different, paying for it themselves, not waiting for the state or some external entity to come in and save them. And I think because of this, a much higher sense of ownership, long-term support, you feel more confident that it's going to be operating 10 years down the road.
Thank you, Rich. You're absolutely correct.
I would point out that, and in conjunction with that comment, we've appreciated a very high availability at this project. We've had almost no downtime at all, and in those circumstances when there has been a problem, it's very quickly remedied. As an example, very early on in the project, we had a little problem with one of the power conditioning electronic components in one of the machines, and I recognized that situation quickly, sent them a part through the mail, and they had the turbine up and running in 3 days. That's the longest interruption we've had with any one machine since the system was commissioned.
I've got a question. How many of these SkyStream units are operating in Alaska, and do you have a sense of how many are grid connected versus independent operation?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, the SkyStream was designed and intended for direct grid application, so by that description, it's a high voltage output machine. So in a sense, it's really only in a typical high voltage load environment. It can be married to a direct battery charging system, but it's not a very elegant solution. So I guess I would describe the division of the number of turbines within Alaska as being those that are on rail belt versus those that are off rail belt. And certainly the greater number of SkyStreams that are up and operating in Alaska are on rail belt grid, more typical single residential applications. In some cases, they may have 2 or perhaps 3 turbines to satisfy their demand. I think there's something like 200 direct grid connected in the state right now.
I think that's probably a little high, probably more like 150, 160.
Okay, so those represent the typical single residential type application. Then we have the off-rail belt grid opportunities, which of course the native villages fall into pretty neatly. And we have the 10 at Perryville, we have a couple in Port Hayden, we've got several in Shaktoolik, there's a couple in Nome, Kipnuk, Queethluk, I'm leaving something else.
Oh, yeah,
Igiag, 2 in Igiagik.
3,
3 in Igiagik.
no, 4, excuse me.
The
4
number
in
gets bigger
Igiag.
every day. So they're definitely spread around throughout the state, and you know, not that there's any one area that they're highly concentrated in. Of course, Alaska's a big state, and there's a lot of open space, so you might have to look a little bit to find them.
Can I make a comment? As far as Igiagik goes, the village council, we went down there and put 3 turbines in for the village council of Igiagik. There's a little YouTube video. If you type in Sisseton Energy, it's well worth the minute and a half. It's a good laugh. The bugs are unbelievable in Igiagik, so make sure you watch that. But the village administrator, who is a nice lady, was watching all the production and everything, and she called us up and she said, I gotta have one of these for my home. So we installed one for her. Her name's Sandy Alvarez. I don't know if any of you know her, but she's a really nice lady. It's cut her utility bill by 60% on her home, and that's 1 turbine. But she does have a pretty big house.
I had a question. If you're in Class 6 or Class 7 area, can you still use the guy wire self-erecting, or what do they call it, will come down design, and I guess I have another idea of that. Can you decrease height? Because I know when I was messing around with this and didn't really, you know, I still don't know anything. And
Oh, well,
I didn't know anything then. I didn't know anything about this 30 foot above your structure. I had something the same height as my structure, and I had more energy, more wind than with small residential than my system could handle. So you might be able to reduce the height.
Oh, absolutely. Towers available anywhere. We use Schedule 40 pipe for the smaller ones, 30, I think 30 foot's the lowest we like to go. Keeps the kids out of it. We do 30, 42, 21 foot sections, 70. You can go 105 if you want, but we don't recommend it. But we have monopoles up to 100 feet. The turbine that we did in Queethluk was offloaded at 8 in the morning. It was taken to the site. It was a bolt-together non-pen mount that Jay and I developed. Actually, Jay did it. It was my idea, but Jay did it. It bolted together. We had the turbine commissioned by 5 o'clock. And that's hooked to the village clinic. So yes, there's all types of operations, and we're also developing other non-pen mounts, because if you can't drive a pile, you can't pour concrete, you build it on top. And they're self-erecting. We use whatever material we have on site, whether it be sand, rock, gravel, old snow machine parts, whatever we need. They hold the base down, it self-erects.
Do you avoid some of the problems with permitting or bird issues also with these?
I can honestly say I know of no bird strikes with the SkyStream.
But I just meant whether there's strikes or not, just that, you know, agencies will say, well, we don't want guideliners or towers or whatever.
Well, I know that Perryville, I mean, Gerald back there can probably talk about it, but when we did this sale, we had a little press release for the Bristol Bay News. He got a call from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They were really concerned about him not informing them. And so that was pretty much the cause of about 6-month delay, because he wanted to implement what their concerns were. They wanted bird reflectors on the guy wires, makes sense. They wanted a fence around the entire farm to collect evidence of bird kills. And he complied with all that, and that's the only issue we've heard so far.
Let's give these guys a good hand. Thank you.
Thank you.